here. We're really excited about you explaining to us a little bit what analysis of sentiment in social media is. What is it that you look for? What are you, how do you know what people are saying? We communicate in 140 characters, but we use sarcasm and we use jokes, and sometimes we are really angry. So how do you read that? How does your company read that? Use artificial intelligence for it, and then sort of come out with an explanation of why Trump became president, being one of the few companies who said it before. And also you predicted Brexit as well. So tell us a little bit how this works and what we should be paying attention to.
Great. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. So sentiment analysis, also known as opinion mining, according to Wikipedia, is the art of using techniques to extract meaning out of text, and basically structuring unstructured text to be able to decide what is it about. Artificial intelligence, incidentally, is terrible at doing that. Because from your point, people are sarcastic, they mix metaphors, mix languages even, they mix up words, they abbreviate words, and language evolves. How people speak today is different to a year ago in terms of the emojis that they use, the kinds of languages they use. So it's a very hard thing for a computer to understand. What we've been able to bring to the kind of technological table is marrying artificial intelligence with crowdsourcing. So we in the US example, we would use local English-speaking people to help our machines understand what's driving sentiment. So to use an example here, if we're looking at the Mexican elections, for example, we'd be using Spanish-speaking Mexican people who would be processing data. So as we track data across the social networks, a portion of that data goes to people who work on our platform. So if you imagine Uber for social media, these are people with computers or on their mobile phones who earn money from working on our platform. And
they translate that.
They essentially answer the question, is this about the Mexican elections, or is this about Trump, and what's the sentiment towards Trump, and what's driving that? So we don't need a computer or an algorithm to be able to try and understand that. We actually use humans to understand humans. And that's actually the magic of what we do. And because of the crowdsourcing platform that we've built, we can do that at a very large scale across any language and in any geographical area. So in the US elections example, I mean, this was 47 million conversations. It's a huge amount of data from 4 million people across the US. And no poll in the world is able to get a sample that big.
And how do you map that? Because do you map it by state and then by...
So that was what was hard initially in the US elections, is because it's an electoral college vote system, if you got it right at a macro level, you would have gotten it wrong, because you would have said Hillary would have won, because she won the popular vote. So we needed to get it right at a state level. So we then used a variety of techniques to try and distill those 4 million people down to where are they.
So to locate them in their
exactly, within their states.
The city.
and in Brexit, it was right down to a town level. So we could see at a town level which way people were going to vote. And that for us was fascinating, because one of the questions we were chatting about earlier was, is it representative of all the people?
Of society, yes.
Exactly, and it's actually a question that's very hard to answer, because we don't know who the people on social media are. We know their names, but we don't know if they are, which party they fall part of, or which customer group they're part of, if we're looking at the banking sector or whatever. So it's quite a difficult question to answer, to map that to reality.
And I was thinking about that because in Mexico, let's say around 60% of the population have access to internet. So that reduces the possibility of who you're talking to or who you're reading from. And then out of that, 30% use Twitter. And in the Facebook side is 9 out of 10 people with access to internet use Facebook. So in reality, how do you make that also representative of what is really going on?
So I think that's where working with local political polling agencies is probably the better route to go. I think we were fortunate in the US and in the UK in that the population on social media is largely representative of the population. But South Africa, incidentally, is different. It's very similar to Mexico, where we've got a large unemployed, 25% unemployment, also a large portion of the population not on social media. And yet, anecdotally, when we looked at the elections last year, social media was very representative of the end result. of how the vote went. And that was curious to me, because often we see social media as almost an exaggeration of the end result. And we're seeing it now in the US with how people are speaking about the wall.
That was my next question, because it seems sort of like it's contradictory to if that same I don't know, if those messages first said that they were voting for Trump, and now yesterday you mentioned that 90% of the people in the United States are against the wall, those of who participated in your poll.
Yeah.
So doesn't that mean like it's against the first polling of voting for Trump?
What we measured on the wall in the US is 9% of people are for the wall. I think it's around 30 or so percent are against the wall, actively against the wall, and the balance are neutral.
Okay.
They're just talking about it but not committing one way or the other. And what was interesting to that is that's very different to 2 months ago when the elections happened. And so within a short space of time, the emotion on the ground has shifted.
Changed.
And that was, I didn't expect that.
No.
I don't think anybody has. And so I think what we're going to see in the future is probably quite interesting if it's moved that quickly in terms of his support base not being as vocal anymore about supporting his ideas. And the immigration ban is 1%. You know, that's a tiny amount of Americans that are actually coming out on social media in support of that policy. And if sentiments move that quickly, I don't know, it's interesting times for America.
It's interesting, but in general, because also, I mean, social media is a place where we sort of really say what we mean. No?
Correct, yeah.
We can be really angry, or we can be out of whatever it is that we want to say. So it does seem incredible that we can sort of switch our sentiments from one place to the other. Where does that come from? I mean, in terms of polling.
I don't think it would say people have switched their sentiment. I would say that sentiment is changing, which is not quite the same thing. Because, and you know, use the example of a man and a woman.
Okay.
You know, the moment you get married, things are good. It takes a long time before they get divorced for kind of those things to play out. And love grows cold over a period of time. And it's no different between a politician and a population, or a brand and its customers. And what we're seeing now is just kind of the initial stages of love growing cold in the US. And I think unless Trump can reposition his policies to kind of go to the people that voted for him, as well as the people who didn't, to be able to say, this is why I'm doing it, and appeal to the underlying emotions, that trend will probably continue. And social media is very reactive like that. It's 9% now. Something could happen and it could be 40% in a month's time. We don't know. But it's kind of being able to measure how that shifts over time, which is where...
And being able to see those ups and downs. Okay.
And then establish how the baselines in there and how are those baselines moving over time. Then that's really where the real insight happens for politicians, governments, brands.
You mentioned brands, which is another part of your business. It's not only politics, but it's also brands. So how do brands use this sentiment analysis to be able to know what they should be offering to their client, or switch products, or what is it that they want to know?
So I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about what we're measuring, is a brand promised X and delivered Y, and we measure that gap, because that's why people complain. And unless a brand can kind of raise their offering to meet what they promised their customers, you're going to end up with more customers being more frustrated over time. So what social media gives a brand predominantly, there's a lot of things that you can do, from risk to kind of campaign analysis. But I think at its core, it's helping bridge the gap between a decision maker and the person who's affected by that decision. So I think, and churn is a good example. Why are customers leaving a bank or a telco or whoever it is? We're able to measure those micro reasons to see, in the 100,000 people that are complaining about this particular bank, for example, why are they complaining, and what internal process within the bank does that point to? Because if 25% of the complaints are about the length of time it gets them to get their credit card, for example, then the bank knows, here's an area within our business that we need to prioritize fixing to be able to fix the customer experience.
one last question, and it's about what are the next polls that you're going to do? What topics are you after? What is it that you're doing analysis now? And is Mexico in that area of interest for you?
Well, definitely, especially after this week. I've just been blown away at how sophisticated and smart and I think hungry people here are for great technology and to do things well. So I think what's next for us is Brexit and Trump. For us was kind of the calling card to show, guys, this works.
Yeah.
But kind of saying it after the fact for us is nice, it's good for us, but it's not actually useful for the decision makers. You want to know beforehand what's going to happen. So right now around the world we're partnering with media agencies and political parties and governments predominantly on the political polling side. Obviously the corporates is another part of the business, to try and help them understand ahead of the election how do they need to position their policies, their speeches, the way in which they're going to win the population so that they can actually do a better job, not just of winning, but actually of winning hearts and minds of people.
And knowing what is that they have to do so that people, sort of vote for them at the end.
Right. I mean, imagine if Hillary Clinton understood the mistrust towards her ahead of the election
months before,
and resigned from the Clinton Foundation. Just that one thing, it could have transformed the elections. But everybody, the media was going on about how much people didn't like Donald Trump, missing the actual bigger element, which was, hang on, there's a big mistrust towards the establishment.
That could make that switch.
And that's the underlying reason, or the underlying kind of emotion which nobody's addressing.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I hope you do come back to Mexico again.
I hope so
and let
too.
us have another conversation.
Good.
Thank you.